Hello, welcome everybody to this webinar on our FSSC 24,000 scheme for social management systems. Today the focus will be on a supply chain perspective. Let me first introduce you to the speakers of today. First we have Guido. Guido is FSSC's Chief Market Officer. Great to have you here, Guido. Guido will talk about market drivers. Then we have Ante. Ante is FSSC's Technical Manager for Social Sustainability. Great that you are in the Netherlands right now and able to join us from the studio, Ante.
Thank you.
Yes, and I know that both Guido and Ante are happy to reply to any questions that you might have. So please feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A section. And at the end of the webinar, we will get back to the questions in the Q&A session. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording and the presentation will be shared with you afterwards. Let me first introduce Foundation FSSC to you. I will do that through our branded house. It's FSSC's vision to contribute to creating a better world. Our mission is to be the leading brand to provide trust and deliver impact to the consumer goods industry. We do so with our 3 pillars. In the first pillar, you see our schemes. The first one is FSSC 22,000 scheme for food safety management systems, and the other one is the FSSC 24,000 scheme, which is today's topic. The second pillar is about assurance, and that's related to trust. And we do that together with our partners, the certification bodies, the accreditation bodies, and of course our independent governance is very important here. Then we have a second pillar on improvement, and together with the schemes, that's how we provide impact. And that's about our assurance platform and learning and development. This is our organization chart. We have the management board, of which Guido is one of the members. Then we have a technical team, we have operations, and we have a brand strategy team. And I want to highlight our independent governance. We have a board of stakeholders, and we have 2 advisory committees. One is dedicated to our FSSC 22,000 scheme, and the other to the 24,000 scheme. Then this is just an introductory slide on the structure of FSSC 24,000. If you would like to deep dive further into information about the FSSC 24,000 scheme, please feel free to search on our website for the recording and presentation of our previous webinar on FSSC 24,000. The structure of our scheme has 3 components. The first one is the PAS 24,000, with the requirements for the social management system. Then we have the Annex A, which contains minimum requirements on several topics. And then we have the FSSC 24,000 requirements, which relates to additional requirements on for the certification bodies, for the to-be certified organizations, and for the accreditation bodies. Now, it's my pleasure to hand over to Guido, who will talk about the market drivers.
Thank you, Ati, and I'm pleased to introduce this topic and elaborate more on the why of we developed like FSSC 24,000, because there must be a market driver in front of developing a scheme and why this is important. And I think the key thing that we need to discuss is that we talk about people. It's the let's say the driver in the market is that consumers are more and more aware that you have like employees in your company in a supply chain that are like say harmed by freedom of association, discrimination. Child labor is a problem in the supply chain, and gender equality is a big topic. And more consumers are aware. We make products for consumers, and Generation Z is one of the latest consumers, that are key for the industry. And they are well educated. They really care. They really care about the supply chain. They know where the products are coming from. This is a study from McKinsey, and it's a very good study. And they really consider, okay, when they do a purchase and when they look at brands, that they really are looking into, okay, is this something that is in line with my own ethical behavior? And they are saying, okay, they know where it's coming from. They know where to search for the information. And as you can see, they also like say, okay, they are aware when something's happening in the supply chain. That's important for them. So that's a key driver that you adhere to your consumers. But also it must be an internal driver at your company and in the supply chain that you want to make a good product. And if you look a little bit more deeper into this one, so we've got your external stakeholders, as we call them, which is the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. It's the SSCI, it's the Sustainable Supply Chain Initiative. NGOs are looking at you as a company, but not only as a company yourself, but also in the full supply chain. Next to it, we've got a regulatory driver. Because I say if consumers want this and it's important for the industry and it's important for the environment, then there's also legislation is coming up. EU CSRD, the German Supply Chain Act, California Supply Chain Act, Australian Act. Ante will also elaborate a little bit more in the regulatory environment for that. ESG, so a lot of companies are, like say, have investors behind them, and there are still more and more investors looking into, like say, green investments and also into the social part of it. And maybe another one driver is that, okay, a lot of audits are performed at companies, and ISO-based management systems are important for that one. So you can like integrate your system. You don't have like a specific part for food safety, a specific part for social, specific for environmental. No, it's better to like integrate it and have like say direct within your own policies your audits to that. Okay, something now to celebrate. Because I mentioned already, like I said, the Sustainable Supply Chain Initiative, which is a benchmark for standards, and that we're, like say, companies are, like say, adhering to. And that was too fast. We are now acknowledged by last week. We celebrated, we already, like our scheme is now, like say, recognized by SSCI. So we're going through the full process. It was a six-step process, and I need to thank Ante and Elizabeth for that one, for the hard work that they did. And this is one step in our roadmap to get recognition in the market. So it's important to tell that, say, companies, like say, also in the supplier, if they want to be certified, that they also go in the next stage, that your retailer is accepting the certificate from FSSC, FSC 24000, and say, okay, as a recognized standard. Something good to celebrate on. Features and benefits. That brings us to, okay, we can celebrate, but then we have some features and benefits. Why should you select 24000? First one, okay, it's an ISO-based management system. It's accredited. It's recognized by SSCI now, and we're looking for more recognitions to that. We are, I think, good to mention, from a company, from foundation perspective, we are a non-profit foundation. And this is why also that we keep, like say, a mission to create a better world, as you can already see, but also that we can keep our fees very low for that one, so we don't put a lot of extra costs to the supply chain. ISO-based, that's what we do in the food safety field, but also now in the social domain, which has a broader scope than only like food companies, and it's an independent standard. Now it's a PAS, public available standard 24000. We're looking for, okay, if they can also turn into an ISO 24000 standard, and you can integrate them. What makes us different is that we are risk-based, so it's not predefined. As a company, as your supply chain, you need to do your own risk analytics and see how does it bring value to our operations, how it's going to be more specific. And To guide you as a company through that, we also have like guidance documents, which is not a part of the standard of the scheme itself, but it's say, okay, how we envision that you do some kind of interpretation of the clause and give a little bit more like substance to the topic. Having this said, okay, I also want to bring us saying, okay, then we do the audit by the certifications, by the licensed certification bodies, and then we have like something, okay, we got a report, we got a very nice report, there are some outcomes, maybe there are some non-conformities, that's for continuous improvement, but then, okay, what's going to do next? Okay, so it's on the website, you can go to a public register, and you can access all information from the certified organizations. You can see, like say, if they're certified, if they are suspended, what the validity of the certificate is. We have a 3-year certificate. It's a full cycle from initial audit, surveillance audit 1 in the year 2, and surveillance audit 3 in the 3rd year, and then it starts over with renewal. So it's good to see that there is, like say, what the status of the certificate is. We also going to use that information to see like, across the industries what are some pain points that we're going to make some reports on. And if we are also developing some digital solutions now where you can see a little bit more deep dive into your reports and see, okay, is it more interesting to see more deep dives into specific losses to your industry, what could be potential risks, and where you can improve. So from a certificate, you got the report, and then you can also look into the industry reports, understanding trends, focus on education of your staff, education of your suppliers, and also continuously improving your business. So yes, there are some good market drivers for this one. I think we have a very good, it's a risk-based solution that we offer, and there's a lot of transparency in the supply chain. But you can really, say, share the information across the different actors in the supply chain. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand over to Ati. There you are.
Thank you, Guido. And thanks a lot for your great presentation. Yes, we proceed with to ask you for some feedback from your side. So we have a poll question, and the question is, has the newly introduced EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive changed your attitude toward managing your organization supply chain? And we kindly request you to provide your feedback to these questions. I see some responses coming in. So at the time, it's about 1/3 saying yes. Now there are more saying that they are not sure about that they don't know enough about the CSDDD. So I'm looking forward to your presentation, Ante. And about 20% says that the CSDDD does not apply to me for the organization. You can still reply to the poll if you've not done so. Okay. Let's continue with your presentation, Ante. So I'll hand the stick to you.
Thank you very much, Ati. Thank you, Guido, for your valuable information. And I'm not surprised to say that the results are a mixed bag, of course, but supply chain management, or procurement, as we say, is very delicate. And of course, this doesn't mean that it should apply to every organization across the world, because there are many, many regulatory differences. And now we are going to focus on the technical part. Specifically how 24,000 is probably going to help you in order to implement due diligence processes and policies within your social procurement process. Before we deep dive into the details, I would like to address that following guidance documents are available on the FSSC websites and can be downloaded for free. So currently we have a set of guidance documents available. The first one is the assessment of risks and opportunities, context of the organization, operational planning and control, and ultimately guidance document on social procurement and human rights due diligence, which is the topic of today. So the legal landscape in Europe changed in the past years, and currently we have the German Supply Chain Act introduced on the 1st of January 2023, followed by the Provisional Agreement on the European Union Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, and the Council of the EU and the European Parliament reached this agreement on the 14th of December last year. If we think about the legal expectation, it's a two-sided coin. So firstly, we need to meet the legal requirements, and this is also the part of FSSC 24,000, past 24,000, that at minimum legal expectations and requirements should be met. Now, if we think and look at the European Supply Chain Directive, the scope is divided in two groups depending on the size and sector of the European organizations. So the first group is related to organization with more than 500 employees and a net turnover of roughly 150 European million or more worldwide. The second group applies to limited liability companies operating in certain highly affected sectors that do not meet the threshold of Group 1, but have more than 250 employees and a net turnover of 40 million or more worldwide. So this directive is referred to highly affected sectors, including the textile industry, agriculture, and the extraction of minerals. This group has 2 more years than the first group to comply with the law. In addition to these groups, companies from third countries operating in the European Union with a turnover in the European Union corresponding to the threshold of Groups 1 and 2 also fall within the scope of the law. So, although SMEs are not the target of this proposal, they could be indirectly affected by supporting measures. So, what are the key components of the European Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive? The first one, due diligence obligations. Integrating responsible and appropriate due diligence processes on its governance, supply chain management, and social and human rights factors into policies, procedures, and risk assessments within social management. Then, followed by transparent sustainability reporting, disclosure of information, and continuous reporting on social performance, in particular on human rights and governance factors. And lastly, enforcement. So, organizations should designate or supervisory authorities to monitor whether the organization comply with their due diligence obligations. So, the legal landscape. In addition to the mandatory legislative frameworks, there are multinational enterprises and recommendations. For instance, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, shortly OECD, which has developed the most comprehensive set of government-backed recommendations on responsible business conduct, and of course the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, provide a significant guidance and context for meeting the legal requirements. If we take a closer look at Clause 4 of the PAS 24,000 requirements, it says, under the context of the organization, that understanding the needs and expectation of interested parties, the organization should determine which of these needs and expectations are or could become legal requirements and other requirements. So we see here a close interaction between the legal requirements which are already introduced or will be introduced and the requirements that are highlighted and outlined in the PAS 24,000. So as a social certification scheme, FSSC 24,000 provides a robust framework of requirements that are reflected in these guidelines and can be helpful in the development and implementation of human rights, due diligence processes, and supply chain management. How does this work? For instance, the development of social policies should be in place, followed by the consultation and participation of workers. Planning. An organization should thoroughly plan the processes and steps required in order to follow the due diligence principles. Then, every information should be documented. They need to demonstrate the fulfillment of legal requirements. And then, lastly, this should be the final step, it should be reviewed. The outcome and the analysis should be reviewed by the management and included in the inputs. The due diligence process is the biggest anchor for every organization, specifically for the social procurement and the human rights due diligence process, and it requires a continuous monitoring of these processes. And PAS 24,000 has 3 clauses that are referring explicitly to the due diligence process, that it's important for the social procurement. The organization should ensure that externally provided processes, raw materials, ingredients, products, packaging materials, or services that are relevant to the social management system are controlled and conform to the applicable requirements, meaning should also meet the legal expectation. Then we have another requirement that is stipulating that the consultation and participation of workers, the organization should emphasize the consultation of non-managerial workers to determine applicable controls for outsourcing, procurement, and contractors. And the most important aspect, of course, human rights policies. A human rights policy should be included in the due diligence process, and it is established, implemented, and maintained to identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for how the organization addresses its impacts. So, we have learned that these requirements are closely linked to each other and aim to identify, prevent, or mitigate adverse human rights impacts that are directly linked to the organization's operations, products, or services, even if the organization has not contributed to those impacts. The process approach, it's a very familiar step that we see. The implementation of social management system is key to ensuring a robust human rights due diligence process. So we see the PDCA cycle that is originating from the ISO approach. So first step would be to assess adverse social impacts of its providers. We act on the findings that have been identified. We check and track the implementation and continuously monitor the progress. And the last step would be we act and remediate and communicate. And the potential adverse impacts and social risks that may arise within the organization and the linked processes is hence a risk-based approach that has been numerous times already mentioned by Guido during his presentation. So, I think the implementation is, of course, the most crucial process. and the identification of high-risk suppliers for which specific monitoring activities may apply. The first step would be to communicate the FSSC 24000 requirements, and this process may include the identification of a range of service providers who are directly or indirectly involved in the supply chain and business relationships. Implement and incorporate robust and responsible businesses conduct into social management policies and procedures. In addition, the actual and potential adverse social impacts of these providers may vary depending on various factors such as sector, geography, cultural and political circumstances, etc. Third, assessment of adverse social impacts and prioritizing by the risk, severity, and the likelihood of occurrence. Based on the prioritization of social impacts, the organization can start preventing or mitigating potential adverse social impacts, meaning that they can develop and implement plans starting with the most salient issues. They could consult the workers to develop appropriate plans in cooperation with the service provider. There are numerous ways, basically, to build leverage into new and existing business relationships. Integrate and act on the findings. So it's important to track the implementation and results, and should be based on the agreed actions, expectations, and timelines. Assessment data, so these can be signed agreements, self-assessment questionnaires, audit reports, etc. These should be reviewed and analyzed and ultimately incorporated into the risk assessment. In addition, reviews of complaints and grievance mechanisms can be conducted, or you can also incorporate stakeholder feedback. Monitoring the effectiveness of the implementation and results ultimately is funneled into the management review and then communicated to the entire stakeholders and business partners. And then we have to communicate or report and remediate. So the organization determines through tracking and verification that it causes adverse effects and should address such effects by providing or cooperating with their remediation actions. Auditing, I think, auditing is also a very important part because FSSC 24000 sets a number of requirements for organizations in relation to social issues within the supply chain. Auditors, hence, should examine the approach an organization has taken to. In particular, specific references are made to externally supplied products, raw materials, additives, products, packaging materials, and services. Auditors should examine to which extent the requirements have been fulfilled and the criteria used for prioritization. Act on the identified findings on the impact assessment. For instance, input or data used. Monitor the implementation of actions defined to mitigate the adverse impacts. Measures are taken to ensure that all actual or potential adverse social impacts are taken into account. Review of records could also be a measure, and supporting evidence that identifies its associated social impact and the agreed expectation and results of implementation, evaluation is maintained. Of course, another opportunity and possibility is the periodic reviews and set intervals. Check the supplier audit reports and the frequency based on the identified risk. And communication to business partners and validation. So, very important, the auditor should bear in mind that the organization should determine the extent of the document information that is deemed necessary. There is no specific 24000 requirement on how to document the due diligence process. The risk assessment should be plausible and based on verifiable data and factors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ante. You managed the time quite well, so we have plenty of time left for our Q&A session. And I know both of you are looking forward to answering them, so let's go ahead. Let me have a look at the first question. Let me address this one to you, Guido. What is FSSC's opinion on other standards from a procurement perspective? Does FSSC recognize these schemes for supply chain management?
Thank you for that question. I think it's a very good question because let's say, okay, there are a lot of other standards in the market. Now I'm applying for 24,000. I'm looking at my supply chain, but in the supply chain, there are other standards, like say, from a procurement perspective. And still, like say, if you do your risk analysis on your business and you see you write down your policies on it, then you can say, okay, but how can I achieve these policies to my company? And for sure, like say, there are other standards in the market that say, okay, they're still applicable. You say, okay, they fulfill my needs. And that's also how the SSCI benchmarking works. To say these are standards that are equally, like say, benchmarked and have the same, like say, recognition as we have. For sure, you can go for 24,000 as the ultimate solution, but still, yeah, for sure, that we will support them. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Guido. And talking about other standards, that brings me to another question from Peter, Peter, I don't know, who submitted a question on, what are the advantages of FSSC 24,000 compared to SA 8,000? Also from the perspective of organizations that have already been certified to SA 8,000. Who would like to take that question?
You have a good choice, so I will take over. So basically, both schemes are somehow comparable. SA 1000 is also a management-based scheme. But the biggest difference between FSSC 24,000 and SA 8000 is obviously the ISO-based approach. So we have a fully ISO-aligned process in place, and I think this is the biggest difference. But again, both schemes are very similar. Thinking about the social procurement and the expectation by the scheme, it's very similar, but again, what we are looking for is a risk-based approach throughout the entire organizational structure. So if we think back, the presentation, the part where I mentioned the context of the organization, this is something coming from the ISO element, which you will not find as such in SA 1000. But again, the biggest difference is we are following a fully ISO aligned process and approach, whereas SA 1000 is solely based on, let's say 70 or 21-1.
And it's easier to integrate with current systems like ISO 9001, exactly, ISO 14001, and FSC 20000 for that. So it's easier to integrate 24,000 into your current structures.
Yeah, I think your addition also helps for a better understanding. So thanks to both of you. A question to Guido. How does the SSCI recognition support the supply chain? It's a question from Inma.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we are very pleased to have this recognition. It was a lot of work to, like say, to adhere to this process, but there's a lot of value in it because if you look at it, there are 23 partners already in the supply chain. There are some retailers in, there's the industries in that already say, okay, if you have this SSCI recognition, then we say, okay, we recognize it as into our procurement standards. That we say, okay, we follow this standard as a good standard, as a recognized standard. So it's the recognition in the market to that.
Okay. Here's a question from Valentina. How to become a lead auditor for FSSC 24,000?
Yeah. Good question, Valentina. Thank you. Becoming a lead auditor for FC 24,000 is quite simple. So the most important aspect should be that the lead auditor should be a CSCA by APSCA. So this is one important criteria that should be met. Secondly, the lead auditor should pass the mandatory FSSC 24,000 trainings. And should be monitored, of course, or witnessed by a qualified FSSC 24,000 auditor. So these are the basic requirements. And if more information are needed, the qualification criteria requirements are indicated in the scheme documents.
And there's one additional requirement for lead assessor course that you need to have.
So there must be. Thank you, Guido. Of course. ISO-based 40-hour course must be also demonstrated.
Okay, thanks a lot. Let's move forward to the next question, which is from Marco. My company is in leather manufacturing, so I'm unfamiliar with FSSC 22,000. However, we are interested in FSSC 24,000. Yep. How can we go about getting certified? Who wants to take that question?
I can take that one.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Okay. So there are two questions in this one. Is FSSC 24,000 has a broader scope than 22,000? 22,000 is food manufacturing, like say food companies as a start. The scope of FSSC 24,000 has a broader scope, like say it's leather industry, it's textile industry, it's food industry. So there's no, like say, minimum requirement to say there must be a food company. So any company, there's a scoping document into our scheme saying which industries you can be certified for FSSC 24,000. It's beneficial if your company has already like another ISO standard, ISO 9001, ISO 14001, or ISO 45001, because then your company is already familiar with the ISO structure. And then it's just like say adding up just to the requirements, like reading the standard, making familiar, reading the guidance documents that we have, and making familiar with them. And if you have any question, just come back to us and we can support you with that.
Okay, great. Yeah, another comparison question. Let me address that one to you again, Ante. Could you highlight perhaps some differences between FSSC 24,000 and SMITA? It's a question from Esa Nola. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, but Ante.
Yeah, thank you. Today is my great question day, so I like it. So, SMETA and FSSC 24,000 in the first instance are not comparable at all, because on the one hand, we have a social management scheme, which is 24,000, whereas SMETA is a verification initiative. So it's a checklist auditing, and checklist auditing does not include a risk-based approach and continuous improvement, meaning that non-conformities can be raised but not necessarily followed up upon, where in 24,000 continuous improvement must be demonstrated within a 3-year certification cycle. So this is the biggest difference. And if an organization is seeking 24,000 certification and has already a SMETA verification system, it can be similar, because human rights policies and human rights expectations are the same, because everything is based on the ILO guiding principles. But in general, management system-based elements are lacking or missing in SMETA, and sometimes organizations need to put additional effort in order to implement a management-based system into their organizational structure.
And I think to maybe to add to that, it's FSSC 24,000 is a management system, and it's a 3-year cycle certification, yes, which is accredited, yes, other than a report only.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as Guido said, we have a certification, and on the other hand, we have a verification where no certificates are issued. So basically what you have is a report, and the report can be only accessed by members or linked suppliers or buyers.
Yes, and that's, Guido, perhaps you could extend on that one, because ours can be found on our public register.
Yeah, Yeah, so we have an open public register, as I was already highlighting in my presentation, where you can access the companies who are certified to that. And we are building up, like a digital transformation strategy that we also looking into, okay, not only seeing the companies as saying certified or not and the validity on it, but in future you also can access the information with some restrictions for sure, to see and to share that report in the supply chain.
Yeah, which is great for supply chain management, of course. Yes, okay. Thanks a lot. For you again, Ante, what preventive measures can we take as a company to ensure we comply with the FSSC 24,000 requirements and thus eventually meet the legal requirements? Do I have to repeat the question because it's quite a mouthful?
Yeah, I will try to answer. Okay. If I need your support, I will scream. So yes, preemptive measures. It's a core requirement, but there is no exhaustive list of preventive measures because it always depends on the company profile, the organization profile, the structure, the country. The situation in general, and of course, and this is most important, the outcome of the risk analysis that needs to be done. So based on the outcome of the risk analysis, the organization should determine which preventive measures should be taken in order to, as I said, mitigate or even prevent adverse impacts. So, but there are some I would say essential measures that can be implemented by the organization. So whether it can be human rights trainings for employees and suppliers, effective and accessible grievance mechanisms can be implemented throughout the entire supply chain. Then clear guidance for employees and business relationships. There is a continuous monitoring of the preventive measures once they are implemented to ensure the effectiveness. And a very important measure could be, thinking back about the European Supply Chain Directive, the collaboration with other companies, NGOs, governments, to jointly work on solutions where the risks are too complicated to solve or to be solved by a single company. So a close collaboration between industrial sectors is sometimes also a very positive approach in order to implement preventive measures. So enter a dialogue about human rights with your business partners, with anybody within your supply chain. So meaningful engagement with external stakeholders. What are the expectations? What are the needs? And of course, there must be a clear communication on the expectation and requirements. So it should be clearly understood, and this is linked again to the training measures. So provide trainings on these topics, on the human rights, and consider the feedback that you receive from your workers, from your supply chain, from your stakeholders, and incorporate it into a plan that you could ultimately develop.
Okay, thanks for that, Ante. This is perhaps a bit difficult one, but since you mentioned the risk-based approach on the supply chain of the organization, it's a question from Marcia Rossi. Could you please mention a concrete example of high-risk findings on the supply chain that could affect the continuity of a supplier?
Yes. So basically, there are several critical factors, but it always depends how you monitor the outcome, how this information is reaching to you. So the identification of, obviously, child labor is a critical situation. The identification of severe discrimination is a critical situation, forced labor. So it always depends where this situation has been identified within your supply chain and what measures you are going to take as an organization. Keep in mind that once such a situation has been identified in your supply chain, it's too late. So the remediation process will be drastically increasing. Your resources will be increasing, your efforts, your overall efforts as an organization will be increasing. But again, critical is everything that can be found in your human rights policy. So everything that is included in the PAS 24,000 can be ultimately rated as critical. It's a very generic answer, but every category within with your human rights policy can be rated as critical. It affects the entire society. It affects entire working groups, structures, communities. So,
yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thanks a lot, Ante. Let me address this one to you, Guido. It's already said, I think, but please again, highlight. Is FSSC 24,000 applicable to all sectors or mainly food industries?
It's applicable to all sectors within the scope of the document. So it's not only food. No, it's very broad scope, I would say. There are some exemptions, like say, I think there's drugs, weapons, other, like say, there are some restrictions for that one, for sure. You can find them in the scheme documents, the scopes, but it's a very broad scope, yeah.
Okay.
So it's also a new focus for FSSC as a company, as a foundation. It's not food only, it's also other industries that we are going to, yeah.
Okay, great. This is a question from Tracy, and that must be related to the audit duration time. What is the duration, and is there a calculator based on number of employees?
yes, there is. So the minimum audit duration is 8 hours, which is 1 audit day. And the calculation can be found in the scheme documents. There is a classification of the number of employees, the organization size, so the size of the company. And based on this information and on this data, you can determine the audit day effort. But again, the minimum audit duration is 8 hours.
Okay. A question from Cesar. Does FSSC 24,000 certification have different ratings like Amfori, BSCI, ABC?
Yes, significant difference. So Amfori BSCI has its own rating system, which is not identical at all to the FSSC non-conformity classification based on ISO. So this is the biggest difference. We have non-conformity classification starting from minor, major, and critical non-conformities. FSSC 24,000 does not incorporate and understand opportunities for improvement. So this is the biggest difference.
Okay. And then there's a question on combined audits. Is it possible to have FSSC 22,000 and FSSC 24,000 at the same time in one company?
You can take it.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, Guido.
The answer is it depends, because it's based on the auditor qualification. So in essence, yes, they can be combined, like say, but in practice, it will be 2 auditors, one, like say, with a food safety qualification, the other one with the social qualification to it. Some certification bodies have maybe a person that have both qualifications in it. You can also have an audit team with like 2 members, 2 auditors coming at the same time to your company. As this is an ISO-based integrated, the integration is on 2 levels, not the integration as you have as a company yourself, like say, by having same policies and procedures, not duplicated, specific for all food safety or for social. So that's the integration on one end. On the other end is the combined audit effects, I would say, and if it's possible, I would say on the major part, it will be 2 auditors coming in. You can save maybe a little bit of time to that one, to the ISO regulations for that. So that's mainly the answer. Yeah. So it's possible, but mainly you get 2 auditors at the same time.
Okay, I think that that's a good reply to that question. There's a question from Karin. I think it's for you, Ante, but please feel free to reply as well, Guido.
First ask the question.
Yeah, okay. What are the benefits compared to ISO 26000 besides that?
That's Guido's question, actually. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. First, ISO 26000 has a very broad scope, because
that's part of the question
that's
as well,
part of
but
the
you
question.
already started. So,
ISO 24000 is focusing on social sustainability. Next to that, ISO 26000 is not a certification standard in itself. It was not built to be a certification standard. ISO 24000 is a certification requirement. So there's like some difference that you cannot compare them at all, because I think 24000 is only a part of the 26000, and even like say 26000 is not certifiable.
But additional to that, could you perhaps?
I think focus is the key answer to that.
Yeah,
There's a key focus, and it's real certification that specifically looks at the social element of that. Yeah.
Okay, let me have a look if I still have something on my list not yet replied to. A very specific one. Home personal care products, industries and cosmetics, are they covered in this standard?
I think it falls under chemical products. I'm not quite sure, but if yes, then yeah, definitely.
Okay. Okay.
I think we can add as a part of the presentation that we're going to share today, that we show the overview of the scopes that are included in the 24000.
Yes, and
as a specific slide.
Yeah, and otherwise it's also in the
available on the
Part of
website.
the scheme document.
Yeah. So, and the scheme documents are always available for download, free download through our website. So yes, I think there was one more as a final question that could be addressed. What is expected of an organization that outsources certain processes to, for example, a factory in the third world?
What expectations?
Yeah, and for which evidence is provided that staff have to work under more severe conditions, perhaps.
So yes, this is part of the continuous monitoring process. So there are numerous ways this can be achieved, whether the organization is going to perform on-site visits, meaning some sort of audits, on-site audits. Other monitoring activities can also be implemented, like you can share some self-assessment questionnaire, some questionnaires that are showing that a specific progress is demonstrated. Interviews with workers can be done. Nowadays, this is also possible remotely, but in remote destination, it's some sort of difficult. So it can be demonstrated, but it depends always on the company profile, the location, of course, and the outcome of the risk analysis. Is it a high-risk sector? Can it be easily accessed? Which data is required in order to see that my expectation and the requirements that I as an organization have set up? But yes, I think the most effective way is, of course, on-site visits in regulated intervals.
Okay. I think I've covered most or all of the questions that were submitted through the Q&A section. Thanks to both of you for replying to all those questions, and thanks to all of you for submitting the questions. And because, of course, it's additional knowledge and information shared through this webinar. So thank you for that. That brings us close to the end of this webinar. I would like to highlight again our FSSC website, where you can find a lot of additional information. You can also find upcoming events information. Just to mention for now that the next webinar will be on the 6th of March, but that one will be dedicated to our FSSC 22,000 scheme for food safety management systems. And then you could also subscribe to our public newsletter through our website. And if you subscribe to the newsletter, you will always receive important updates, notifications, and upcoming webinars are included there as well. Yes, the guidance documents highlighted by Ante, they are also available free for download on our website. And yes, last but not least, I would also like to mention our socials. You can always, we are open to submit, to reply to your questions and comments on socials. So feel free to reach out to us also through the contact form on our website. In the presentation, we will not show that today, but there's a slide as well on our local representatives. They are always open to connect with you, so feel free to reach out to them. They are part of your team as well, Guido, and they are very open to reply to your questions and provide you with additional information. Yes, I think I covered most of the important topics. Yes. Anything to add from your side, Guido? Ante?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And then thanks to all of you for joining this webinar. And as already mentioned, you will receive both the presentation and the recording afterwards. So I hope to see you again in one of our upcoming webinars.
Thank you.